tell me a bit about your background and how you came across the idea and what was happening and everything for the Curse of the Turtle.
Basically, I was living in Thailand, and like a lot of people that went to Thailand, I originally went there as a scuba dive instructor. And I was teaching diving and living on Koh Tao, which is a beautiful island with beautiful oceans and beautiful beaches, and everything was absolutely wonderful and marvelous. Until one day, one of the main dive school owners was assassinated in broad daylight. Which was a bit like, uh-oh, what's going on here then? Didn't pay too much attention to it, not entirely sure why. But a few years later, I moved to the bigger island of Koh Samui. So in the Gulf of Thailand, you've got Koh Tao, and then you've got Koh Phangan, which is the home of the full moon parties. And then you've got Koh Samui, and then you've got the mainland. So I moved over to Koh Samui, and after about 9 years of diving, I was getting a little bit tired of the same dive sites, talking about the same things to tourists every day. You know, how long have you been here? What do you miss from home, etc., etc. Friend of mine had a local magazine, and he'd lost his writer, and he asked me if I'd do a couple of restaurant reviews, and I'm like, absolutely, why not? Free food sounds great. Don't know if I can write or not, but started writing for that magazine. In a nutshell, got invited to write for a couple of other newspapers that were written, but they were only bi-weekly, and then everyone was screaming for a daily paper on the island because there wasn't one. So in 2013, I created an online newspaper called the Samui Times, and started covering local events, charity events, the regatta, and then slowly sort of got into things like, you know, crime and the odd murder here and there. And yeah, it all got a little bit more macabre. So I tried to keep a healthy balance of what was going on the islands and, you know, covering the darker side of Thailand. And then, bosh, in 2014 in September, I get a phone call to say there's two backpackers, or there's two bodies been found on Sairi Beach on Koh Tao. And I was like, okay, well, who are they then? Turned out it was two British backpackers, Hannah Witheridge and David Miller, 23 and 24. They'd met on holiday, and they'd been brutally murdered on a beach owned by local influential Thai people. So I was like, wow, didn't see that one coming.
Wow, yeah, wow, indeed. So this scuba person died first. Do you think that's related to all of this?
I think that Koh Tao has a very interesting history. I mean, originally, you know, just some local fishermen took over the island, and their descendants carried on, you know, fishing and coconut farming on the island. And basically, you know, the people on Koh Tao are known as the Koh Tao Mafia. There's 5 main families. They're not mafia like Sicilian mafia. They're not running around with, you know, sawn off shotguns in violin cases by any stretch of the imagination. But you know, they're more tribal. They run the islands, and they were there way before any administrative bodies, before there were any police, before anybody was paying any attention. So these 5 families who run this island very much feel like they're in control, and they're the go-to people. And there's always disputes between these 5 families. And the owner of the largest dive school, Mr. Ban, when he was assassinated, it was over a gambling debt, apparently.
Bloody hell. Is it all a bit... I know you're saying it's different to the mafia in Italy or whatever, but I've never been out to the Far East. I mean, Thailand I've never been to. Does it get all a bit, shall we say, sort of off the grid kind of thing?
Definitely. Koh Tao is a very remote place. It's a bit of an outpost. It's only accessible by boat. When I was there, you know, in 2000, it was only accessible by speedboat. It was, you know, really incredible place. But what happens on Koh Tao stays on Koh Tao, and they really had very little contact with the mainland or the outside world. There was no social media, so they're just kind of running it the way they want to run it. And as long as you keep your head down and, you know, don't make waves, you're fine. But, you know, there was always disputes. There was always justice Thai style. And, you know, on the islands, it's dealt out by the powerful families rather than the police or any administrative bodies. So it's a bit of it's the Wild West, let's face it. It's the Wild West.
And what is it like then as a journalist? Are you fearful of outing people or getting in trouble yourself?
It was made very clear to me very quickly when I started the Samui Times. There were things I could cover and there's things I couldn't. There's a lot of jet ski scams going on all over Thailand, but mainly in the south, where, you know, unscrupulous jet ski operators will tell you that you've damaged their jet ski when actually you haven't, and try and charge an exorbitant amount of money to fix the jet ski that you haven't damaged. And you go to the police, and they're very much on the side of the scammers because they're Thai. The Thai police aren't paid a great deal, so They're known to take tea money. They're known to take bribes. They have to really in order to, pay their kids' education, etc. So it's a bit self-perpetuating. But it was made very clear to me very quickly. If I ran a story about a family that they weren't happy about me running a story, I get a phone call saying, "Get that out of your paper now."
And you did.
I did. Yeah, I did. Yeah.
I would too, to be honest. It's not worth you ending up on that beach, is it?
No, not really. But obviously, when Hannah and David were murdered, I mean, it was such a massive international story. How could I not report on it? And it was difficult because all of a sudden, my news publication that wasn't that widely known. I mean, we were getting about 100,000 visitors a month from over 100 countries, but it was small scale. Next thing I know, I'm getting phone calls from the BBC, from the Telegraph, from the Daily Mail, from ITV, from Fox News. Journalists all over the world hungering for information because I was the only newspaper on the island. So all of a sudden, I was with massive international press that I had no idea what to do with, and at the same time keep myself safe.
Oh, I'm looking at photos now of David and Hannah. I'm interested because I got a couple of friends called David and Hannah, but they broke up. But it's obviously not the same ones. But yeah, so I mean, eventually these two people were arrested. I'll let you say their names so that I don't say them wrong.
Well, initially, I mean, obviously, pretty quickly. I mean, there was only a couple of police on Koh Tao. And when news reached Bangkok that a couple of British backpackers had been murdered, and horribly so, especially in the case of Hannah, the Bangkok police came down, and a policeman called Panya Mayman was put in charge of the case. And initially, he was looking at one of the powerful families. He said there was some video footage of the powerful families. He knew who they were. He was going to arrest them. Interestingly, said no scapegoats are going to be used in this case, and that was at a press conference. I'm not sure why. The military junta at the time, he's now the democratically elected prime minister, said no Thai national could have done this. But one member of the influential family was actually taken in for questioning. And we couldn't believe it. We're like, wow, there's a policeman out there who's actually brave enough to arrest one of the, Koh Tao mafia.
Yeah.
So, but then he was very quickly taken off the case and was replaced with a different policeman who was now in charge of the investigation. And they just started targeting the Burmese community. And, the Thais and the Burmese have got a very checkered history. They don't get on. The Burmese are very much used on the islands for their labor. They're the cogs of the island. They're exploited. They're given very low pay. And a lot of them are brokered there. And they're not even there legally. They just pay the police to be allowed to work and operate on the island. So, and everyone was saying, oh, they're just going to scapegoat a couple of Burmese because that's going to protect their reputation for tourism.
Golly. Okay, and for that reason, so was it 𝐏𝐬𝐲𝐜𝐡 and 𝐸 Lin who were arrested?
𝐏𝐬𝐲𝐜𝐡 and 𝐸 Lin were arrested. Well, they weren't arrested initially. They were taken in for questioning because they were on the beach that night. They never denied they were on the beach that night. They were playing guitar after work. They both worked as waiters. They were taken in for questioning. And the next thing, they confessed to these horrific rape, murder, and another murder. And that was it. They were taken off to the prison on the island of Koh Samui where I was living. And I was like, come on, what's going on here? So I went down to the prison to see them. They'd had no legal representation during 3 days of interrogation. They told me that they'd confessed because they'd been tortured for days on end. And as soon as they got legal representation, they recanted their confessions and said, look, we had nothing to do with it.
Wow. Oh, my word. And then so what happened to them? Did they have to stay in prison? Yeah,
well, they stayed in prison. We got a pro bono team of lawyers for them. They had no previous criminal history. They had no motive. They had no real reason to have hung around on the island for 2.5, 3 weeks after the murders took place. I couldn't believe anyone would be dumb enough to stick around if they'd made that kind of a mess on a mafia-owned beach. And eventually, the prosecutor took the case. It went to trial. We couldn't believe it because there was no witnesses, there was no CCTV, none of the cameras were working that night, and we just couldn't believe it. And the whole trial was a complete farce. Their DNA was not on the murder weapon, which was a garden hoe, which they must have used with immense force. Their DNA wasn't on that murder weapon. No witnesses, no evidence, but they said that they found DNA evidence inside Hannah, one of the victims, that was 100% match to these boys, which scientifically is completely impossible because in a mixed sample of DNA, you know, if I mix your DNA and your companion's DNA and my DNA,
Right.
that's not going to be 100% matched to anybody, right? Because it's 3 lots of DNA. The DNA from the island was taken to Bangkok in a beer box. The laboratory that tested the DNA was not accredited to test the DNA. And DNA expert Jane Torpin from Australia actually flew into Koh Samui to give evidence in the defense of the boys, saying that there was, you know, the DNA was used up. There was only amplified samples available for the defense to retest. The DNA was presented on a piece of paper that had handwritten alterations to it. Some of it had been scrubbed out. There was no official stamp on it. There was no chain of custody. And miraculously, she was never called to testify.
Oh my word. Okay, so then what? So what happened next? So these guys locked up then?
They were sentenced to death.
Did they die?
No, they didn't die. They were sentenced to death, and in Thailand you have the right to 2 appeals. So they had the first appeal with the same bunch of judges. So obviously they lost that one. A couple of years later, it went to the Supreme Court in Bangkok. They lost that one. And then 18 months ago, the king very kindly gave them, he reduced their sentence from death to life in prison. So now they're spending their lives in jail. And this October, they've spent 8 years in Bangkok Central Prison, which is known as the Bangkok Hilton. The Thais call it the Big Tiger for its ability to eat grown men alive. And there they sit to this day, writing to me and pleading for me and my team to do anything we possibly can to prove their innocence and get them out.
Does that feel like a lot of weight on your shoulders?
It's been going on for nearly 8 years. I'm kind of used to that weight on my shoulders now. I mean, I absolutely adore the men. I've spent time with their mothers. I spent time with them when I was in Samui still. I spent 18 months going to the jail 3 times a week to see them. But I mean, while they were in prison, all these other deaths, all these other mysterious deaths happened on Koh Tao. So it's kind of steadily evolving. I mean, Hannah and David died in September 2014. In November 2014, a Swiss guy who was a very strong swimmer. He was a dive master. He apparently mysteriously disappeared in a snorkeling accident, washed up dead after 2 other bodies were found that didn't turn out to be him. Nobody ever figured out who the other bodies were. In 2015, on New Year's Day, a French guy was found hung in his bungalow on Koh Tao with his hands tied behind his back. With absolutely, I saw that crime scene. There's no way he could have done that. January 2015, British Christina Annesley, 23, mysteriously turns up dead of natural causes in the bungalow owned by the first guy he was taken in for questioning. January the 6th, 2016, British-born Luke Miller, 26, is found dead in a swimming pool after he supposedly dived in to impress some party goers, although no one found him until the next morning. Fast forward to 2017, a Russian girl, Valentina, goes missing, never seen again. April 2017, Belgium, Elise Delamagne is found hung in the jungle, half eaten by lizards. I mean, it just goes on and on. So it's not just Hannah and David. I've just been investigating case after case after case where, you know, all in police investigations have led to is a bunch of parents and families who just don't believe any of the rubbish that they're being told.
And were there that many deaths before David and Hannah's, or did that sort of kickstart it?
Before David and Hannah, I mean, British Nick Pearson died on New Year's Day on 2014, just 9 months before David and Hannah. He was there with his family. They saw him to bed that night. The next day, he's floating in the ocean dead, 50 meters down from his, you know, hotel room that was up on the rocks. They said he slept, walked, possibly had no broken bones. And in 2012, British Ben Harrington supposedly fell off his motorbike and broke his neck, but when his body was brought back to the UK, despite all Thai efforts to burn his body before his mother, Pat, who's a nurse, could get hold of him, she managed to get him back, and the autopsy in the UK bore no resemblance to the autopsy in Thailand. So, yeah, there's a lot of families out there who are very upset, and we all collaborated on the book and, of course, the Sky documentary, Death on the Beach.
So what is the consensus here? Is this the mafia just, you know, killing and stealing and raping as well?
I mean, we don't have any absolute proof of anything, but what we do have proof of is that police investigations on that island are absolutely ludicrous. The explanations they give for these deaths make no sense whatsoever. You know, we don't know what's going on Koh Tao, but we do know that there's just, you know, a disproportionate amount of deaths on a tiny island, and there's no explanation. And the common denominator is none of the families are happy with the investigations or the cause of death they've been given for their kids.
Sounds like mafia to me.
Well, I have to be careful what I say. I'm in enough trouble as it is, but you know, it certainly seems like, you know, there's cover-ups going on at the very least. You know, definitely.
Yeah, I should be careful as well in case they come over and get me. Right, probably not the mafia. They're quite nice, the Thai mafia. Right, they're good. They're fine. Yeah, but you, I mean, you left Koh Tao. Why was that? You got an arrest warrant?
Well, I didn't. Yeah, I left Thailand in 2016 because as these deaths were going on, you know, I was digging more and more information out and reporting more and becoming more and more unpopular. I mean, Thailand loves shooting the messenger, and you know, the eyes of the world were on my newspaper. So every time there was a new death, you know, news groups around the world are picking up information from my publication. And I was basically told, you know, you either shut up and stay or you carry on with your newspaper and you leave. I was told there was a list of names and mine was on it, and it was getting nearer and nearer the top. So it just got too dangerous. So in 2016, I lost my bottle and decided I would leave. The boys had been sentenced to death by then. I was furious. Came back to the UK and was approached by a woman in London who said her daughter had been raped on the island, but she had got off alive. And she had a T-shirt with DNA on it. And I thought, here we go. Here's our smoking gun. So I travelled to London to meet the mother. I spoke to the Rape Crisis Centre. I diligently investigated the case. I broke the story, which then got into all the other newspapers. And Thailand responded by saying, I've made the story up. The girl hadn't been raped. She just tried to claim insurance. Where does rape insurance come from? And said that I was peddling fake news. I was guilty of computer crimes, inciting national panic and bringing Thailand into disrepute, and promptly issued an arrest warrant for me.
Bloody hell. What did that feel like to be served with that?
I know, I've never actually seen it. I mean, I was kind of shocked because they said that rape couldn't have happened because it was high tide that night and there was no beach, which is rubbish because it wasn't high tide, and even if there was, there'd still be beach. But interesting, they said it was the World Cup, so it couldn't have happened. I mean, I was just gobsmacked. I mean, I knew they wouldn't be able to extradite me because the story was true. It's not illegal in the UK to report on true stories. My server was in Singapore. My company was registered in the Philippines, so I knew any attempt at extradition would be futile. But you know, you still wake up in a cold sweat at night thinking they found a way around it, and you're now in the same prison that you were in visiting ࿡𝐴𝐻 a few years earlier when they'd been fitted up for something. So yeah, it was a bit scary, but I've kind of got used to it. But it's irritating because I have a lovely villa in Thailand that I can never go back to.
That is annoying, actually. Can you? Oh, well, in fact, we don't have much time, so just tell me a little bit about, you know, where can people get the book and how can they?
Yeah,
help?
they can get the book on Amazon. It's on Amazon. It's called The 𝐾𝐬𝐲𝐜𝐡 𝐅𝐨𝐫, the true story of Thailand's backpacker murders. And it's, you know, I think it's worth the read. It's got some really, really good reviews on Amazon. I know a lot of people have read it. A lot of people have contributed to it. It's been, you know, fact checked diligently. So. Yeah, anyone thinking of traveling to Thailand, I'd never tell anyone don't go there, but I would definitely recommend reading the book first.
Well, fair enough. And we've still got a minute. Just tell me a bit about there's a Sky TV documentary, isn't there?
Yeah, that went out on Sky Crime. It's a 3-part documentary. Sadly, a lot of it got cut out at the last minute. There was a bit of a hatchet job on it, which is a bit disappointing. But certainly episode 1 and episode 2 will give you some idea of what's going on. Although, you know, I'm not sure what happened to episode 3, but at the very last minute, things got taken out. So I don't know who spoke to who, but if someone spoke to Sky, it's nobody insignificant.
Bloody hell, it's all kicking off, isn't it? Who knows how deep this whole thing goes? What can listeners, viewers, can they do anything to help?
Absolutely. I mean, the best thing you can do is just share. You know, I've got a Facebook page. It's called The Curse of the Turtle. I'm on Twitter. You know, read the book, share the news of the book, because the more people know about the story, the more people are reminded. There could be people who were on the islands then that were too afraid to come forward at the time, but they've left and they're not afraid to come forward now. The big deal is somebody out there knows what happened. Somebody out there's got information. And I'm not going to stop while I'm living and breathing trying to find that person. And if I can't prove the boys are innocent, then we need to prove that someone else is guilty. So please contact me. I reply to every message that I get. Looking for anyone who's got any information at all, and obviously promoting the book helps me continue to finance the boys. I've been financing them now for 7.5 years because they cannot survive in prison without outside funds, so that's really important.
Thank you very much for telling us all about that. I had no idea about any of this. It's been fascinating.